located at 0 Pond Street and 152 Wilson Street, the site. The applicant is proposing 25% of the units to be classified as affordable as per Mass General Law, Chapter 40B. The site is located on 0 Pond Street, map 13, map 9, lot 13, map 9, and 152 Wilson Street, lot 60, map 10. A copy of this application materials and plans and other documents are available upon request electronically from the town by dialing 781-871-1874, pressing 1 for the town hall, and then option 6 for the town clerk's office. Okay. So, got it. All right, everybody. Where did we leave off? Who's taking the lead for Shingle Mill?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
how are you this evening?
Mr. Marioni, how you doing, sir?
Very good, thanks. For the record, Walter Marioni, I'm an attorney represent the applicant, the law firm of Marioni, Shaughnessy, and Udy in Quincy, Mass. So, Mr. Chairman, last meeting, we focused on a presentation from our client's LSP, and your peer review LSP was here. We indicated and promised to you that we would arrive this evening with Attorney Don Nagel to give a presentation, however brief, on the Zone A issue. Attorney Nagel is the one that sort of ran the point on this for our client. And when Attorney Nagel is finished, we have Damian Dimitrick from Conoco, who's the civil that did the design. He has been working with your peer review consultant from Amory, and I won't spoil the story. I'll let them, give the update on their progress. But with your permission, I'd like to introduce Mr. Nagel and have him give you the update on the Zone A.
Attorney Nagel, can I interrupt for 2 seconds? And actually, and you're muted at this point, so I mean, get you prepared for that. Just one last warning to anybody that does not have their full name in the name block. You're gonna have to either log out and log back in with the new name, or you're gonna have to change it somehow. If you don't, I'm gonna bounce you. So you've got one more chance. Attorney Nagel, let's hear it.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, my name is, I'm Attorney Donald Nagel. I represent Conoco, and I have been involved in this project on various issues, in particular with regard to the Zone A. So we've been interacting with DEP quite a bit about this. As you know, that has been a challenge to this project, and we've been working with DEP on it. We did at least 3 site walks. I just want to make a kind of preliminary comment about the Mass Mapper. It's used to call Mass GIS, now it's called Mass Mapper. That has got a caveat to it, a disclaimer that it's based on mostly aerial photographs and other information that may be incomplete or inaccurate, and it's not, and I emphasize not, based on field data. So we, of course, did a field investigation and determined that what's depicted on the Mass Mapper website is not accurate. We reached out to DEP, in particular Bruce Bauk and Richard Friend. Those names probably are familiar to you guys by now. So we did at least 3 site visits, and the bottom line is Mass DEP agreed to some minor changes to the Zone A based on these 3 site visits. I submitted for the record an email to this board from Richard Friend dated August 19th, 2022, where Mr. Friend verified in writing that our revised Zone A, based on the field investigations, is indeed accurate. So we prepared revised plans based on that revision to the Zone A. And and we've submitted that to the board. Damian Dimitrik is with us tonight from Conoco, and if you'd like, I could ask him to put that up on the screen so everybody can see what the current Zone A looks like.
Well, that's in process. Mr. Nagel, I had a question about this.
Sure.
When did you guys first go to DEP to challenge this?
Well, that's a good question.
How long after the initial application?
I mean, it was a couple of months, but it's been probably a half dozen months since we've engaged DEP on this issue. Damien, does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an ongoing process with the, discussions of the Zone A.
Right, that's understood, but the question is my question is when did you first contact DEP to challenge this? When did you first do this? How long after the first application was put in? Basically, how long after the first 5 meetings that we had did you put this into DEP to challenge it? How long was it?
I don't know off the top of my head. I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, I
say
mean,
that
I can't
unless
really,
having actual-
I could guess, but I mean, we've been dealing with the Zone A. I've been involved in this issue for at least 6 months.
Yeah, but not from day one. This is what I'm
That's
trying
right.
to get at. This is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah,
The sheer fact is that if you guys knew about this Zone A from the beginning, wouldn't you have challenged DEP from the beginning? You never did. And I'm trying to figure out why. Is it that we didn't know that there was a Zone A there, or that we didn't talk about it because we didn't think anybody would pick up on it? That's what I'm trying to figure out. If you knew it was there and you were challenging it, I would think that you would have started the challenge right from day one.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I must say, Mike Toohill, from Conoco,
Yep.
I think is the person who first reached out to DEP. And frankly, it was before I was even involved in it.
I know this.
And so he would be the one to answer that question. But this issue has been hanging around for a while, and we've wrestled with it. I was brought in to help facilitate discussions on that.
Mhm.
When we decided, okay, let's go talk to DEP, that was at least 6 months ago, which how many weeks or months that was after the Zone A issue first, reared its ugly head? I really can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
Okay. And that's a question that I really want to answer, because it's like, it didn't exist as far as everybody was concerned at this point. It didn't exist until well into the series of meetings. This was well into, I'm going to say it was like at least 6 or 7 meetings after the initial opener.
Yeah.
Jones Street was still involved in this. And then all of a sudden it came out of the woodwork, and it's almost like you guys didn't even know that it existed. And then you challenged it. So it's like, I'm having a hard time with the whole thing. I read all the emails. I paid attention to the whole thing. A lot of this goes over my head, but I paid attention. And I just don't understand why it literally took discovery by the peer review for the Conservation Commission to turn around and drop this bomb. Why wasn't it, brought out in the beginning? I guess that's the biggest problem that I'm having. And I'd really like an answer to that. Even if it's, well, we didn't know it was there, we screwed up. Even if it's that, and I'd like an answer to it. think the board would like an answer to it. Quite
Yeah.
honestly, I think the town would like an answer to it.
Yeah, I could maybe shed a little bit more light on this, because I have been involved in a lot of the Concom discussions, and the peer reviewers on the Concom have raised a whole panoply of issues, not just the zone A.
No, that I understand too.
And so it's kind of like we're picking them off one by one. And the other, and so zone A was one of a number of issues. A lot of them were like more technical issues that I wasn't really directly involved in, but I was privy to those discussions. So I think you're, Chairman, I think you're raising a good question. It's like, how did this, why and when, and that kind of thing. And I think from my subjective point of view, to be quite honest, it's subjective, that I was brought in, there was a slew of issues that we were working on, picking through one by one between the Concom and the ZBA. And I know that Damien has generated a number of different plans to address those issues and zero in and fine tune and see what really could work. And frankly, the regulatory framework is quite complicated. To be able to sort these things out and figure out, okay, what can we really do here, and what is like a no-go. When I got involved, which again was after the issue was initially raised by the Concom, I've had a lot of experience with dealing with GIS and with DEP's interpretations in a number of different programs. I used to work at DEP as I was an attorney there. So I was very familiar with the idea that, the zone A, they throw up the zone A and they throw up other resource areas on there. But I knew that you have to go to the field and you have to analyze it. Experts have to go out and really figure it out. And then it gets fine-tuned from there. And the other thing that I can tell you is the initial discussions with DEP doesn't want to, they don't want to have to revise every zone A in the state. They don't want to have to, fine-tune everything. And it's hard to get their attention. So a lot of time has gone by. And from your perspective, it's like, well, what's going on here? So it took some time to engage with DEP and to just initially get their attention, but also to get down to the brass tacks with regard to the technical issues of, where's the tributary, where's the continual flow on the gradient, and let's look at the definitions and make sure we're all on the same page. So it's been a journey on this, and I'm happy to report. I get to announce the fun stuff, at least from the client, from the applicant's perspective, that we actually did resolve it, and so that's kind of where we are right now. And Damien has put together a plan that accommodates the new zone A, and we think we're in good shape, that we're ready to, go on and address the other issues both here and at the Concom. But obviously we're here to talk about the zone A. So, that's kind of my subjective perspective on kind of how we got to where we are today.
Thank you, Attorney Nagel. I appreciate that. Mr. Dimitrick, I'm sorry. I did not mean to bust in on you like that.
No, that's fine. And what I'd like to do is kind of piggyback on top of Don, and it may clarify, because I have been involved in a project for a time, and then was relieved for a period of time, and now I'm back here. With the initial design, we were aware of the zone A and what was originally shown. There's interpretations within the laws of how things are read. In the laws of the stormwater standards, it claims discharges, right? the interpretation of what the word discharge means could be, has been bounced around. And that's what we've been working with DEP to resolve, is not only, what is allowed within this zone A, but also, to what extent is this zone A actually exist? As, Don said, the Mass Mapper website, the GIS, it says right on it, this is not for, that this is a interpretation of where these lines are. This is, and we've been fighting back and forth with them. We were aware that the zone A was there. And if you go back and the initial design I had the stormwater structures, the underground infiltration, the discharge points outside of the zone A. All of that was in that initial design. Further investigation and conversations with DEP has, refined down, what a lot of those definitions are, what a tributary is, what they're considering in that fashion. So it was there. We were designing and we weren't trying to, sneak it by anybody, but it was just a matter of, whittling down those definitions and those specifics of what is allowed and how we're allowed to do that. And, that is exactly what comes up in peer review, these interpretations, there's certain ways of how things are perceived and, how I can make the design work as an engineer. So, the initial project submission, back in here, if I can pull up where, at whatever time it was, however long ago it was, we were aware of it, and we weren't trying to, we were keeping, doing our best to make that design work for that.
All right. And then these definitions and interpretations, you got a list of them? Do you have a list that we can actually look at and see what DEP is saying that you can and can't do in there?
Yeah, I mean, we can formulate and show, the decisions and where we've gone with the particulars and the ones that I'm aware of at this time. There's certain ones with the tributaries and, to the extent at which that goes, we can.
And what's attributable to this project? What's applicable rather to this project?
So I guess, the definition of a tributary, how that's defined, would be, is it a bank line or is it, a drop of water? Is it what's shown on Mass DEP, for what they are,
I understand, sir.
Yeah, so I'm giving you a couple examples.
How did they? That's what I'm looking for, the definitions that you are working by as given to you by DEP. Because again, I've gone through these regulations with both Pat Brennan and Greg Tanzi, and it's difficult to navigate through, even for licensed engineers. I understand this, but the sheer fact is that you're telling me that DEP basically worked with you, gave you definitions to work with. I'd like to know what they are.
Yeah, well, I could chime in a little bit on that, if I may.
Please.
And I kind of have, I have notes on this. We communicated with DEP on definitions of a tributary, because let's start with the zone A. Zone A, a land area within 200-foot lateral distance from the upper boundary of a bank of a tributary or associated surface water body. So okay, so then what's a bank? What's a tributary? And so, I got a definition of bank right in front of me and a tributary. So, we engage with DEP on that. There's no controversy over what these definitions are. They're in the regulations. But applying it to this site required us to get our boots on and go out there and take a look. And which was really quite, credit to DEP that they put the time and resources into this to do that, and also to review our revisions and confirm them. So, those are some key definitions that we used.
Again, if we can put that together on a document that was and forward it to the zoning board, that would be nice.
Okay, will do.
All right,
Mr.
Damien.
Chairman,
Wait, hold on, Damien. Put the plan up just so we can get to that point.
Oh yeah, of course. Are we looking at it?
I see it now. Wait, Bob Baker, did I cut you off? Were you asking for something?
Just when they get all that stuff from DEP,
Mhm.
can we get some names and who the people are they talking to?
Yeah, other than this Richard Friend, it would be nice. We know that guy's name, but you know, anybody else involved with this, that would be nice.
Right.
Yeah, Richard Friend was the main guy.
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Baker Jr., yes, sir.
thank you. And just to follow up on Mr. Baker Senior's comment, and I don't want to impose an undue burden on the applicant, but if perhaps something a little more than a list of names could be provided, perhaps, and I think you expressed the concern about the chronology of this matter,
Mhm.
about who was contacted at the DEP, when, and about what. Because I'm sure there wasn't a single thread of conversation or communication going between the applicant or his representatives and one individual at the DEP. So I'd like to get as complete a picture as we can about what the communication was in both directions. I also have a question to ask to the applicant or one of his representatives. What, if anything, do you have from the DEP that states definitively that the requirements of the limitations imposed by Zone A are no longer an impediment to your project? I mean, this is something that we've talked about at least for the last 2 meetings. Show us something from the DEP that says, from their perspective, from an environmental perspective, certainly from the Zone A perspective, that this project is a go. Do you have anything in hand right now that says that?
Well, that determination right now is before your board and before the country.
No, I'm talking about from the DEP perspective, Council. Do you have anything from the DEP that says that anything within their jurisdiction is no longer a concern or an impediment to your plan?
They would never say that.
Oh.
They would never say that. What they did say is that our revised Zone A is accurate. And then, take it from there. And so that's what
The question is, are they going to put anything down 100% in definitive writing? Are they going to, is there going to be an actual map issued? Is there going to be something on DEP letterhead that says, as of this date, DEP has, has revised the Zone A, Is there do we know if there's going to be something like that? Because right now, I know we're dealing with emails. I see what the emails say. I see the word draft on this plan, and I still feel like it's not official yet. I think the whole board thinks this, or feels this way, that it's not an official, it's nothing official, and that's the thing that we're kind of, I don't know, we don't like. So I don't know where we stand with that.
Yeah. Well, I would always tell people, if DEP tells you something, it means zero. It means nothing.
Okay.
Until they write it down.
Right. So that's.
And so they wrote it down in the email that I sent to the board. But what I think, Chair, if I may, I think really what you're asking for or about is, well, why doesn't DEP upload this new Zone A into the mass mapper?
No, that I'm not worried about. Because quite honestly, I know the caveats when it comes to Mass GIS. I understand the caveats when it comes to Mass GIS.
Yeah. Okay.
But because this is such a contentious situation, I would figure that DEP would turn around and issue something formal instead of just emails going back and forth saying this, that, the other thing. That's kind of what that's kind of what I think the boards in this town are going to be looking for. And you're telling me that DEP is not going to do that. And I don't know. I don't know if I buy that or not.
And Mr. Chairman, my recollection is at least 2 meetings ago, the applicant or one or some of his representatives indicated their understanding that that was what we were seeking from DEP and that they would be able to provide it.
Yeah, I understand. And I think that,
Oh, I'm not sure you do, Counsel.
well, I mean, I put it this way, we got something in writing from DEP. It's an email. It's not a formal declaration, but we could request a more formal letter addressed to the board, if that's what you like.
I think that would be, I think that would work a lot better in your favor. You know, I'm not, it's,
I mean, there's no guarantee that they would do that.
I appreciate that.
But from what I understand, they haven't even been asked to provide that. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, we were thrilled to get this email, believe me. And so we wouldn't have presented this new zone A to you if we hadn't gotten that email.
Well, we know you got the email, but again, that's not what we've been looking for. And I thought what we had made very clear that that was what we were looking
Mr. Chairman, wouldn't they have, if they got an email from DEP, wouldn't you think they would have attached it to this new picture of the Zone A?
I hear you, sir, and I hear you, Mr. Baker. I'll bet you $100 that Attorney Nagel could put that up on the screen if he had to.
Yeah, it is attached to the email.
Because I know it was in the, I know that the email was submitted to, whatchamacallit, was submitted to us for, as a part of the package. I know that it was in there. I'm trying to find it right now and I don't see it, but I know that it was in here.
I must have missed it.
And Attorney Nagel, if you did have that and could put that up there, just so we could see it, because I know this point, I know that a snippet of the portion of this map was attached into that email. I know that. There we go. Saw something coming up there.
Is that you, Damien?
Yep, this is me chatting. Sorry, Don, this is the correct letter.
Yes, it is.
Yep. So here
Can
is
you click on the attachment? Is that it?
the attachment you can see is the same as shown up here. I mean, I'll double click it, but it is.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, it's the same document.
So,
All right, so we know that, and
Yeah, I'll pull it back up. I apologize. Just trying to sort through everything. Here we go.
Is it possible you can expand it a little bit?
the text is a little small. I'm sorry.
Understood.
yeah, we agree with the changes you show on the attached map. They describe it. Richard Friend, we report, my understanding is anyway, he reports to Bruce Back, and Bruce Back is the head of the water supply in Boston.
I think that shows a good definition of, the map that was sent, which was the 721 version. Agreed to the changes shown on the attached map. Blue and purple hatch, or blue with purple hatch, no change. Purple hatch only, delete from zone A area. That would be this area here. Blue hatch only, add in zone A area, which is this sliver here.
Right. I mean, I can definitely see everything. I see the email coming from Richard Friend. I've read it several times. The plan, I see that several times. I guess that, again, I'm looking at an email, not thinking that it's very formal, but in the grand scheme of things, will that hold up in court? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not an attorney, but if that's something that'll hold up in court, then it is what it is.
I guess certainly from a layperson's perspective, layperson in the realm of what the DEP is talking about, I find it very difficult to transfer or translate what is in that email into the imprimatur of the DEP that the project's okay. I mean, I see what the instructions are, or the definitions are of how the map is changed. But the resulting changes to the map, do those mean that the project is okay from DEP?
Mr. Baker Jr., can I interject here?
Please do.
I think at this point, and Attorney Nagel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, I don't think you would get a determination such as that from DEP. Again, at this time, this is what you're looking for. I feel like what you're looking for is something that the Conservation Commission would have to, would be seeking at that point. Because they're
Well, again, it was my understanding, Mr. Chairman, that was what the applicant was going to seek.
Okay, all right. And I think to produce it at this meeting without having gone to conservation first, I don't know if that was possible. I know they continued the last conservation hearing. And again, I'm not trying to speak in favor of anybody or anything like that. I just know timing wise, if they had gone through conservation, at least that dialogue would have been opened up. And it's already been opened up, but the dialogue would have continued. But to get through this process, to get what you're asking, I don't know if they could do that at this time. I think that would have to come through somehow through the Conservation Commission. And they've continued so many times that I don't think they've had the ability. Attorney Nagel, if I'm speaking out of line here, let me know. But I think that's something that you guys would have to seek through conservation.
Yeah, no, you're right, Chair. I mean, this, kind of getting the Zone A set, if you will, provides the parameters from which we can proceed with the Concom, and we're doing just that. We have a meeting scheduled for next week with the Concom,
Yep.
and this Zone A is before them. Revised plans are before them, and so we're ready to engage in the details of this project from a Conservation Commission point of view that will give the Concom the ability to evaluate whether this project meets the performance standards under the Wetlands Act based on this Zone A. And of course, numerous other factors, because there's other resource areas that they have to contend with. So I think we're on the right track here. We will, I expect that we'll be making progress, will accelerate with the Concom because we have this clarification now. And, subsequent to that hearing at the Concom and subsequent, I know we're still working on, we only received peer review comments from the Concom the other day. So we're working on responses to those comments. So everything's not going to get resolved next week, but we're poised to make some progress on this project. And I know that there's been a lot of continuances both here and in the Concom, principally because of the Zone A issue.
So basically, if I can paraphrase, this whole initial exercise with DEP was really just to figure out the boundaries that you could work within.
That's correct.
Mr. Baker Jr., does that help at all? I know.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I did. Again, sir, I just want you to, I know what you're looking for, and sir, I'm looking for the same thing. At this point, I don't know if we're going to get that, but I would like to welcome Mr. Stephen Galley. I just saw that he showed up. What's going on, sir?
I'm fine, thanks. I've been here. I just missed the very, very, very beginning.
No, then it happens. Well, welcome to the meeting, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Attorney Nagel, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Mr. Patrick, thank you very much. Just because we're kind of hovering on this on this issue right now, I want to open it up to the board. I want to see what they have to say. I'm gonna start right off with the big gun. Mr. Tanzi, anything to say, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a little bit curious about the Zone A map. I did speak with Richard Friend from the DEP personally. He did indicate that there was a segment of the Zone A that he could not see or find, which would reflect the content of his email. What was unclear to me is how was that map remapped in the field? In other words, if there was a segment that did not appear on the site, how do you know what segment that is, or what's the length of that segment? This could only be done through survey data and taking shots on where that Zone A tributary starts or end. I appreciate you bringing this up on the plan. My other question, and maybe you can answer it, is this green line, is that a new tributary found on the site? Is that a revised? I can't, it's in the key. I can't read the key on the screen.
So yes, that was a tributary that was defined with flagging, bank, edge, and this red line was the section that was removed because they indicated that it didn't come this far onto the site, and they revised that it would, this is a more accurate representation of the center line of the tributary.
So that it says.
Those are the flag numbers.
It says in the legend, it's a proposed center line, proposed hydro center line. When you say hydro center line, is that a hydro center line of a tributary?
Yeah, proposed hydrologic connection center line of the tributary. This would be, the blue lines are the center line of the Mass GIS hydro center lines. So the same way in which they map it in the first place, we chose that, and then from there the Zone A is produced 200 feet off of that center line per DEP.
Well, if you look at the green line or the pink line next to the green line, the old mapped DEP tributary line, the pink line, go to
the old line.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one right there.
No, go down south. Now move the cursor to the west. You see yeah, right there. The tributary, the
red one.
Yes, that tributary. So that was where the DEP mapped the tributary, and it flows from north to south into the reservoir. So now the DEP is saying that tributary segment to the south of the site does not flow south, but it flows north up through that green line, up around and into the confluence of the tributaries to the west off site. I'm trying to understand how this tributary map is working, because if this green line is a new tributary, you've got a flow reversal in that southern tributary.
I believe, again, due to the fact that these Mass GIS center lines are, based off interpreted, aerial topography and other information, they agreed that they were, that this line could be removed. And I wasn't the one directly speaking with DEP. I kind of just created the maps and did the CAD revisions here. I didn't flag any of these. I wasn't on site for this. But I believe this red line, they concluded in their field investigations that there were, that the tributary did not extend to that reach, that this was more likely the center line of the tributary, and that this line was not, accurate. The direction of the flow here, I think is, not completely understood, because again, it's flat. The definition of what the tributary is, is there a bank line for all of these tributaries? Is there, that information is stuff that we've been trying to communicate with DEP and understand. They have held firm on, the center line of this Mass GIS hydro center line is their tributary center line, given the information that they had. They were willing to, revise that they agreed to that this leg did not exist, and that this was more likely met the definitions of their tributaries.
So
the direction of the flow here, my assumption would be that it still flows in that direction. That's the way the contours typically go. The reason that the information, it seems so blotched throughout this was that there is many ups and downs. It's a marsh wetland. It's not. There's not a defined bank and a defined channel, and that's been part of the struggle for us, is understanding, how these tributaries were defined without a bank, and how those conclusions were made that defined this zone A in the first place.
Why is it labeled bank line then?
What?
It's labeled bank line. You got the word bank line with a leader pointing right towards the green line.
Yes, this was surveyed in the field and concluded to be bank line. These blue lines were based off of Mass GIS information and decisions.
Right. So if it's a bank line, is there two banks? Is there a channel to this? Or
this is the
bank? Is it a left bank? Is it a right bank? Is there only one bank? And then is there a channel?
Again, I don't know if we have that detailed information on that. I think it was defining this line as, more appropriate representation of the hydro center line per how it was mapped with Mass GIS.
Okay. And that goes along the top of a bank?
I didn't define those lines. I wasn't the one there. I believe that these banks are almost very thin, and the definition of a tributary and a bank could be, is still, being understood or interpreted to an extent. And so, these were flags in the field that were shot associated with the tributary.
But we don't know what they represent.
Well, if I could, if
Please.
I may, through the chair. This is considered, this new line is considered a tributary, which defines where the zone A is located.
Okay.
The definition of a tributary means, and I quote, any body of running or intermittently running water which moves in a definite channel. So yes, it's a channel naturally or artificially created in the ground due to a hydraulic gradient, which ultimately flows into a Class A surface water body. So there's a bank, and there's two banks, because there's a channel and there's a bank on either side. And water flows through that channel.
Or they're not shown. Topographic information is not shown. And I'm just to be able to say that DEP saw this and agreed to it. I mean, I can understand that. All right, I can understand you showing that, but I'm looking at this and I don't see a top bank left and right. I don't see any topographic information. I see a two-dimensional representation. So, and knowing where you got the topographic information from when it comes to the overall site, I know where you got it. I use it almost every day. I know that it's, but if you're telling me that there's a channel in there, I don't see it. How did DEP see it? I mean, I'm trying to understand this from the point of both sides, because again, I deal with this kind of stuff every day myself. And knowing that you're trying to tell me that this is the center line of a channel, yet I've got it labeled as bank line. I don't see a top slope left and right. I don't see a defined center line other than this flagged, this flagged line. I'd love to know where that came from. And the other thing is, how did they determine that the blue line tags into the most northern side of your of the green line? Because it seems like a major deviation off of it. So it's like, you didn't flag enough to get to where the DEP says that original center line was, that original tributary line. So it's like, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, unfortunately, it just really does not make any sense. So I just, the guy that flagged it, I'd love to hear from him, because like I said, and I think again, Mr. Tanzi, Mr. Baker, and Mr. Baker Jr. is looking at this too. If there's a channel, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the channel. I'd like to see the topographic information of the channel. I'd like to see which way the water's flowing. I would think that you would have to show that to DEP. It's when I come from the other side of the table, I have to show this. I have to show that information. If you didn't show that information to DEP, I mean, I don't know. It just seems sketchy. I feel like I don't know.
I believe DEP was on site to look at that line.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
this is a result of-
Yeah, of the field investigations and where they were, and they concluded and agreed with it.
that it's
They
the
went out
top.
there at least 3 times.
So they agreed that the top of the bank of a channel, that we don't know if this is left or the right of the bank of the channel, they agreed that was the center line. And you've got it labeled as one thing. You're telling us that it's another. And do you see where I'm going? I mean, it's like, I don't know if it's mislabeling. I don't know what it is, but all I know is that if I have to go out and prove that there's a channel there, I'm hitting a top slope, a center line, and a top slope of the other side, to prove that there's an actual channel there. You hear, Mr. Dimitrick, I think you understand what I'm saying. So, did you process the survey information?
No, I was not the surveyor. I was not the wetland scientist that tagged the banks to this. This information. I'm the engineer. I take the information.
You were given the information. I know. I know. So, that information. Again, I've been in this same kind of situation before. When you go out there to survey a channel, it takes a minimum of 3 shots per cross section. And I don't see that. I don't see that. Mr. Tanzi, he raised this issue. All right. He raised this issue. Gregor, do you hear what I'm saying?
Oh, I do, Mr. Chairman. And, it gets back into the discussion of, where is the flow in this channel? I mean, a tributary channel can be, it can be 6 inches wide and 4 inches deep, and qualify as a channel. But my big question is the pink section of the tributary that they've eliminated. How would the DEP know where they are in the field? I mean, you could take them to a spot that's close to that tributary line. He might think that he's right on it, but what if he's off by 5 or 10 feet and he's looking down on the ground and he's not seeing a tributary? That the tributary segment that has been eliminated would have had to have been located and either flagged or staked, and then somehow proved to the DEP that this stake is right here at the end of that tributary and there's no tributary there.
Yeah. I
In
hear
order
what
to
you're saying.
define how much of that tributary has been eliminated. Now, maybe some of it has, maybe all of it has, but how do you know? That's the question.
So I believe they walked in sections across this tributary area, and they were not able to find the defined bank. They were not able to find any bank, in this area at all. So they walked across from, say this point over here to here, and there was no definition of a bank there.
Mr. Dimitrick,
Or
do you know that
tributary
for a
to the-
fact? Mr. Dimitrick, do you know that for a fact? That's what they
I
do?
know that yes, that they made crosses across it. I apologize. I was not the person on site. Maybe
That's
I
my
spoke out of
point.
turn. I
That's
apologize.
my point.
I apologize.
I appreciate the explanation, and I'll give it to you. That's probably what they did. But to Greg's point, all they would have had to do was load up those lines into the GPS system and lay them out in the field and say, this is where you say it is. Well, I don't see it. And you would have been able to really prove right off the bat. And again, I feel like there's I don't know. I'm not really thrilled with all this. And again, that section between, what is that, B14 and that hard angle that it makes off of the red line. How did that get connected? I see no flags going over to that section. So it's like the section that you flagged didn't even hit where they said that the tributary should have been. So I'm trying to figure out how that happened. And again, Mr. Dimitrick, I know you probably can't answer that, and I'm not looking for you to answer that. But answers to those questions, again, answers to that question and all the questions that Mr. Tanzi has, I think that it's deserved. Those answers are deserved.
Ask a question.
Yeah, please, Mr. Galley, step up.
Just in light of this recent conversation about asking for something documented from DEP that they agree with the map, and you're talking about how they surveyed it, would it be out of line for the applicant to get something, like you said, on letterhead that says this map is, we're in agreement with this map, to whatever degree that they state that, and then also say, this is the methodology we use as you were describing, the GPS mapping or something to that effect? Would that be too much to ask of them to just ask the DEP to put that on the statement? That's my only question.
Attorney Nagel has stated that he would try to do that, but he's not very confident that that'll happen or come in any quick time period. Attorney Nagel, did I get that right?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. You can't really tell DEP what to do. You can ask them nicely, and they may or may not, accommodate you. But frankly, I think, Mr. Galley, I think that's reasonable. That's a reasonable way of kind of answering the questions that have been raised here.
Mm-hmm.
And we could try to do that, but there's no guarantee that DEP is going to cooperate.
A narrative on your half, on the applicant's part, a narrative of how this was on how this was performed. The initial survey will say to go find these tributaries, and just the process that it took. Some sort of narrative from your wetland scientist and documented from your surveyor that basically says how you did it. Because again, I know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a flag line. Now, typically a flag line is one straight line. It's called out as a bank line. So a bank line is also a straight line. But I'd like to know better what that line is defining, if it's defining the top bank, bottom bank, whatever it is, or if it's defining a center line. If there is cross sections that we're taking, which technically should have been to define a channel, well, then that would help too. Some sort of narrative that explains how you guys did this.
I think that's a reasonable request. Like Amy, and I don't want to speculate, I wasn't out there either, but typically, where those flags are identified, a handheld GPS is used to identify the location, and a flag is placed there.
Well, I'd hope that was a little bit more than a handheld. I'm hoping that it's a survey grade GPS. If you're using GPS, I'm hoping that it is a survey grade GPS system. Because if it was a handheld GPS system, now that's something else that I want added into the narrative. I want to know what equipment you use to figure this out. Because that's also a big thing, because a handheld GPS, even today's stuff, is still only about 3 meters. It's still only about 3 meter accuracy. So the survey grade, heck of a lot tighter than that. So I'd like to make sure that that's the case. I mean, I'm only assuming that Conoco has some of the most up-to-date survey equipment out there. So I'd like to know how that all came together. So some sort of narrative from the wetland scientist, a little bit of, a paragraph or two from the surveyor, to make us get a happy feeling that you guys did this correctly. And correctly really isn't even the correct word. And it's that you did it scientifically and didn't just go out there and say, hey, here's the flags. You know what I mean? It's I think you know what I'm saying. And I'm not accusing you guys of doing anything. I think a better understanding of your process would be a great help to this board and potentially Conservation Commission.
I think that's a reasonable request.
Mr. Galley, does that satisfy you a little bit?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, it does. Your flexibility in the criteria, I think, would serve us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galley. All right, I started with Grega. Mr. Tanzi, do you have anything further to talk about?
I just was curious. I know that you're still working with the Zone A with the DEP, and are there any other issues that you're working with the DEP or any other regulatory agent or permits that you're currently seeking to get or intend on getting, or is this really the only thing you're dealing with the DEP on any regulatory agency?
Yeah, like any other permits, right? And when it comes right down to it, you're going to have the
I'm sorry. Very good. Yeah. Other than a building permit, other than DPW compliance with utilities, that type of thing. I'm that requires some type of state
or local permitting that we wouldn't necessarily know about. Again, building permits you're going to go for. The comp permit we're dealing with right now. Any and all construction permits you'd have to go through sewer, water, highway department, conservation. Is there anything else permit wise that you guys would be seeking that we're missing at this point? You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know. And again, I don't know if that gets directed to you, Attorney Nagel, to you, Attorney Mirioni. I don't know who that actually would get directed to. So basically, other than the permits that we know you guys are going to need, is there anything else outside of that you guys would have to seek to make this happen?
Well, if I could just speak to that, the whole idea of a comprehensive permit before the ZBA really pulls it all together. Obviously, from a local perspective, Obviously, we got a state permit that's issued by the Concom. And so, if that gets, if we get an approval out of the Concom, then we don't need to go to the state. And the only issue that I'm aware of that we have engaged the DEP on this project is the Zone A.
Okay. All right. Does that answer the question, Greg?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Mr. Tangi. I'm going to keep going in the line that I have here. He's got his mic off. Mr. Haynes, talk to me, sir.
Gosh, where do I begin? They're all that. I had a lot of other questions about other stuff in the submittal, but so just to stick to this subject.
Yeah, just for right now, because I kind of want to put this to bed. You know what I mean?
Good. So on the issue of the Zone A, so as I understand it, there's a little piece that is now off the map. So let's just without worrying about do we have written approval stuff. We've taken that off the map. I don't really understand what that. I don't understand what that got you. So when I look at, and part of my problem looking at the drawing is that the north arrow on every page goes in a different direction. So I'm constantly chasing, like, what direction was that? So it looks to me like there's a whole section. So when I look at the grading and drainage plans, these are 13 and 14, you've got the Zone A overlaid on those plans. And so following those, could you sort of tell me what resolving this issue got you, and what you had to redesign? Because it looks like some of the subsurface drainage systems have changed and moved. And I just wanted to get a sense of, you went through all of this to redefine where the Zone A is. Maybe you could show us where that is, where the redefined area is, sort of heading towards the vernal pool.
Yeah.
Basically, I think he's asking for what did this gain you? What were you able to put in areas that you couldn't put before?
What occurred with the Zone A, we are keeping all of our drainage facilities, structures, and everything that would be considered a discharge outside of the limits of that Zone A as defined. So with that design, that additional leg had brought us, further into this. So we were able to actually import the drainage systems into this area of the site. Additionally, with the final definition of the Zone A and what we were allowed there, we have maintained, or we have, any stormwater drainage feature structure is outside of these Zone A lines.
So
Basically, it sounds like that's the major modification. Does that sound right, Tim? And that sounds like
looked like it. It's just so much of it was under the parking lot anyways, and there's not, and the amount of parking area has changed substantially. So I'm still was it kind of following along, like, what did you actually, what changed in your design as a result of that? I mean, literally directly as a result of not having what looks like just that little bit under the bar building, heading towards that vernal pool, right? There was like a little, maybe it was just like a little sliver of space, but could you just describe to me what changes you made as a result of that?
So no major changes occurred to the layout or the design. We're able to maintain much of our information. The Zone A puts requirements on stormwater discharges, and that was one of the interpretations or definitions that we were, working, had to work through and understand, was what is a stormwater discharge? And a stormwater discharge, is any stormwater EMP device or thing to collect and channelize stormwater. So what we did was, things that were originally pipes that, ran up this access towards your front of the site are no longer there. It's all overland flow, that comes at the front of the site here. We, again, outside that, definition, the Zoom feature doesn't, you know, kept our stormwater discharges outside of your zone A or outside of the zone A. With the, you know, on the, so, you know, so that's the front here. We go to a high point, you know, there's no specific, you know, definition defined stormwater discharge there per, you know, per what we've come to as a conclusion of the interpretation. You know, again, drainage features, everything here has been placed outside of that. You know, the redrawing of the zone A along this line has given us this parking area the ability to spread out our drainage systems and collect things at different points. So that's what was gained there, you know, from the redefinition of the zone A. You know,
Yeah, the parking lot stayed the same though?
parking lot stayed the same.
Okay.
There might have been some minor modifications, but nothing that was done due to the zone A. But besides the grading and the drainage, I think I'd have to go back and look at, depends. There's been so many iterations of this, what you see as the last time that would have been the parking that you thought it was. But from when I jumped back into this, after tie and bond, this is I believe what the parking law has been.
Yeah, I was
Tim,
referring to.
can I ask Pat Brennan to get involved in this? Tim, do you mind if I ask Pat Brennan to jump in?
Well, I have some questions for him, and I hope he will, but maybe we could just finish the conversation, and then I'm hoping we're hearing from our consultants tonight.
Oh, yeah.
So I was referring to the previous submittal before you guys reduced the size of the building before these issues weren't resolved. So you sort of touched on the other part of my question, which is you've got this, it looked like you had the stormwater pulled in and some of the drainage pulled in, but there's still a lot of activity. Can you talk about your thoughts about you're saying that the types of structures and building, including raising the level of the land by 10 feet, would be something you consider to be permissible inside of a zone A? That would be a permissible activity, bringing in all that fill and putting it in the zone A?
From my understanding, yes, that is not a restriction that is upon the zone A. That's how we've designed it, and I believe that that isn't a restriction that is set by that. I don't think that's come up in the peer review, or it may be being discussed where the design is being discussed with the peer review at this time.
Great. So that may be and then in terms of the setbacks to zone A, are there any particular, like in wetlands, we have a 25-foot no disturbance zone, and there's some areas, but you're actually in zone A on this. So what about setbacks to zone A? How do they differentiate between operating in a zone A and our other required 25% no disturb zones?
So a zone A doesn't really have a setback, but it does work with a zone B and then a zone C subsequently. And they're all parts of, that work off of each other. Our stormwater drainage, the discharges for those have to be treated to a further extent to be allowed to be treated, to be within, the outstanding resources or those other zones. So, we have to get pre-treatment, beyond the normal scope and other things to that extent to meet the requirements of the stormwater standards.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Yep. Mr. Chairman, do you want to just stick to the zone A stuff for now, or anything wetlands and drainage? I mean, what's other?
Wetlands and drainage. We have through all of this, we barely even talked or touched upon the local wetlands bylaw. We haven't we barely even talked about that. So I think that's a completely different discussion. So, and if you want to talk about it, I guess we can, but I kind
No,
of
no, I
want.
want you to set the, I just wanted to, you were calling on board members for questions. I just wanted to make sure we're staying on topic.
That's kind of where I wanted to stay, is on this zone A and what you can and can't do. I did see one of the comments that came through here, and I've talked to other engineers about this. What about the sewer for the building? Weren't you gonna run a sewer line down Mr. Dimitrick, weren't you gonna run a sewer line down that causeway?
What causeway?
I thought you were coming off of Pond Street for your sewer.
It's going a different direction now.
Yeah, it's the sewer has always been going through Wilson Street.
Okay.
So the sewer commission, then there's a letter with some of the sewer commission requirements with concrete embedments and testing down the line. There's some, they were looking for, one of their conditions was an updated DEP map.
Okay, so they're all right, they're on the same point. Okay. All right, Mr. Haynes, what else you got on the zone
On
side?
this particular subject, that was it. I just wanted to have that conversation about what is allowed, and then in order for us to refer to our consultants and have our consultants talk to us about those allowed activities. From my perspective, it's hard to understand being able to put 10 feet of fill on top of zone A as a permitted activity. And so, so I'd love to hear I get how we got to the new map, but I'm more concerned with the activities on all the other parts of the zone A and what's actually permitted activities.
It's understood. I had conferred with Pat Brennan a while ago about this, and I had asked him to kind of put together a list of the cans and can'ts and the do's and do nots. Mr. Brennan, I'm coming to you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, before Pat goes, I have one.
Yeah, no, Bob, I want Pat to get in here because that's going to answer pretty much Tim's questions. That's my point. That's why I wanted to talk to Mr. Brennan. Mr. Brennan, I want you to remember what we talked about, the do's and the don'ts. Do you have what is the applicant at this point working within the do's of the zone A?
Yeah, for the record, Pat Brennan with Amory Engineers. But yeah, so the zone A, and to answer, I believe it was Mr. Baker Jr.'s question, the only thing DEP has done so far is basically confirm the revisions to the zone A. They haven't approved anything. The things that cannot be placed in zone A, and I have the regulations open right now. I'll read through them real quick, kind of summarize them. Can't have underground storage tanks, above ground storage of liquid hazardous materials, the use of emergency generators, and that was brought up in the peer review to the Conservation Commission, the letter that was just issued on Friday. Some 21E information, which I'll look into a little bit further. You cannot have any septic systems. You cannot have, let's see, the other thing that was brought up in the Concom peer review letter was sewer lines. And what that actual regulation reads is within the zone A of all surface water supplies and tributaries as defined in 310 CMR 22.02, all sewer lines and appurtenances are prohibited except as required to eliminate existing or potential pollution to the water supply or where the crossing of tributaries is necessary to construct a public sewer system. So that's an issue that was just brought up and we're looking into a little bit further right now, because there's no way for them to get a sewer line out to Pond Street without going through the zone A. Can't have pumping stations within 1,000 feet of the surface water supplies. You can't keep livestock, stabling, hitching, standing of livestock through zone A. Can't have any burials, so cemeteries. And that's pretty much the Zone A restrictions. There is a, further, it says you cannot swim, wade, or bathe in any of the, any reservoirs. And those are pretty much the restrictions that are listed in the surface water supply protection standards. So the fill is not necessarily restricted. Obviously, it needs to be clean fill, and I know there was a lot of discussion about that in previous meetings. At this point, as Mr. Dimitruk had mentioned, they have pulled all of the stormwater infrastructure outside of the Zone A, so it's not within Zone A right now. The stormwater we're still going through, we still have some concerns with that, so that's not a done deal at this point. We have some issues that both the conservation peer reviewer and myself have with that, and those have just come to light fairly recently, so we'll have to sit down and talk about that with the applicant's engineer. And so, yeah, right now, as far as Zone A, the issues that I see are the sewer and the emergency generator. They can move that outside of the Zone A. The sewer may be an issue for them. So those are the big Zone A issues at this point in time.
Tim, does that help answer the questions?
Yes.
Mr. Baker, Senior, now it's your turn.
Could we put the map back up, please?
All right, can I ask what specific map?
The Zone A map.
Zone A map, you got it.
The one with the infiltrated structures on it.
Oh, the site, the one overlaid on the site, on the proposed site.
I'm sorry. Do all those tanks tie into one and then go to an outflow?
There's 3 different discharge points.
Okay. When we had Home Depot come in, we required them to put a shutoff valve at every outflow into the woods, so that if there was a major spill on that property, they could shut the flow off, and it had a containment chamber. You go over to Home Depot, it's when you drive straight in, there's like a stormwater floodgate shut off. I think we should have those at the outflows, so that if there is a major spill of an oil truck comes in for some reason to turn around and he hits something, opens his tank, we can shut those valves off to stop the flow of the oil or any contamination.
That makes sense.
If there's a major fire in there, God forbid, we could shut that off so the ash and everything else doesn't get into the wetlands.
Pat, does that sound correct? It sounds very reasonable. It sounds very reasonable to me.
Yeah, it's typical, and typically you'd actually have those shutoff valves prior to the infiltration system, so you're also not discharging to the groundwater.
Yeah, I was just about, I was saying, because I wasn't sure if I couldn't remember infiltration or retention.
But there should be something there to stop any flow out of the property.
Mr. Dimitruk, do you know you know what we're talking about? You know what the
Yeah, they're currently not proposed, but we can I'll work with my client to what extent would be required and would I'm sure it's not if to be approved if that was a sticking point we would work with you guys.
Mr. Baker, does that work?
That's all I had.
Thank you, sir. All right, where's my line here? You good? No, you're good. You're good. You're good. Mr. Baker Jr., what says you? Are you good at this point, or?
Just to follow up on Mr. Haynes' question regarding the 10-foot addition to the topography, and Mr. Brennan's comment statement that clean fill would not be prohibited under the standards he was referring to. And I know this is a matter that we've dealt with at some length in the past. I have two questions. One, what constitutes clean fill? And I'm not suggesting we need an answer to this tonight, but just something for consideration. What constitutes clean fill? And if anything contains a contaminant, how do you know that it's contaminated until possibly it's too late, until it's already been laid down and infiltrated into whatever it can get into? So that's all. Don't expect answers. Just wanted that out there for consideration.
No, I've thought long and hard about this, and that's something that if it came down to it, we could potentially condition an outside consultant that's on site the whole time, basically taking care of that, and that's all he's there to do. So that's something that, and again, I don't know how to make that work yet, but it is something that would be the answer to that. So it'd be an outside consultant working for the town, paid for by the applicant to kind of be the police, be the soil police, basically. That's kind of my thought process at this point. Mr. Baker Jr., is that all you had at this point, sir?
It is, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Now going to my associate members. Mr. Galley, talk to me, sir.
I don't have anything more to contribute. Actually, I was afraid we were going to talk about the fill for a long time because we talked about it for a long time before. But as long as it's been put out there to discuss, but not to go on forever tonight, then I got nothing more to talk about.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Galley. Miss Nicole Clement Galmez, do you have anything? Is this the first shingle mill meeting you've been to, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Have you looked into the history of this at all?
Yeah, no, I have all that information. So I've been.
It's a lot of information to get through, huh?
Yeah, definitely. It's taking up my dining room.
You're coming into it at a good point now, because everything that we had to deal with for the previous 2 years means nothing. The only thing that we have to concern ourselves with now is everything that's been within the last 2 meetings, 2 or 3 meetings. So you escaped a big portion of this. Do you have anything that you'd like to discuss tonight, ma'am?
No, I do not. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Ms. Nicole Clement Gomez. All right, now we're gonna go to I want to go back to Pat Brennan real quick. We saw the emails going back and forth about the drainage system. Do you feel comfortable that you're almost there?
I wouldn't say almost there. I think there's still some work to do there.
Okay.
I mean, you saw my email this morning. I did copy you on it. I copied Deb as well.
Yep.
And I think that's an issue with the mounting analysis and not allowing those infiltration systems to infiltrate. So I think it's an issue that we need to work through.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you kind of picked up that you don't think will fly, or?
My focus right now is the stormwater, and then the sewer line as well.
Yep.
So those are the 2 big things right now.
All right, but other than that, everything's okay at this point.
Yeah, they really haven't changed much else on the site at this point, so not much to comment on there.
Okay. Let's see, who else we got? Attorney Galvin. He's been very silent, so I want to get his voice heard here. I don't think he's home. There we go.
I'm here. No, I'm just listening quietly, listening to everything everybody says. I don't have anything.
And I would assume that if you did catch something out of line, you would have said something by now. So
I've been at your house taking those guitars off the wall.
Nice. All right. At this point, we got everybody there. Is there anybody?
Do we want to read the letter from the water department and the sewer?
Actually, that's a really good question. Deb, can you tell me, has the applicant, do you know if the applicants received all these associated letters that came through, the police, the fire, water? Mr. Dimitrick, can you confirm that?
We have received them. We've seen the ones that were posted. They had not been, we have not reviewed them in their entirety or created a response to those comments.
All right, so of the, for, again, sewer, we should have sewer, water, fire, and police, correct?
Yes, I believe I saw those when I pulled earlier today when they were on the town website.
All
And
right.
highway.
And highway, so there was a fifth one, there was also highway department. Mr. Baker, if you feel it necessary, please do. I have no problem with
that. This one's from the Rockland Abington Joint Waterworks dated November 4th, 2022. Rockland Zoning Board regarding Zero Pond Street shingle mills. Members of the Rockland Zoning Board, I am here. I am writing on behalf of the Abington Rockland Joint Waterworks to express our concerns regarding the potential negative impact of the proposed shingle mills project. As you are aware, the Abington Rockland Joint Waterworks is responsible for providing public drinking water to the town of Rockland. What is not shown on the plans submitted to the zoning board is the proximity of the project to one of Abington Rockland main water supply and treatment facility located adjacent to the proposed development. In fact, much of the proposed property falls within our Zone A, major tributary to our public water supply for our reservoir located off of Hingham Street. For this reason, the Abington Rockland Joint Waterworks is gravely concerned about the potential negative impact the project may have on the water supply, both from a supply volume and a potential contamination threat. In theory, any contamination that falls within a Zone A has a direct path to either public drinking water supply sources. Therefore, we are not in favor of the zoning board granting any waivers for this project, as the proposed project presents a secondary threat to one of the town's most precious resources. From a volume percentage, we are in the process of evaluating the ability of our system to support this project with public drinking water while maintaining service to our existing customers and staying in compliance with our Water Management Act withdrawal permit. Sincerely, Christine Cameron, Superintendent of the Water Department.
All right, so what I got from that letter, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I got from that letter is that they object to the project based on potential contamination and the fact that Rockland doesn't have the capacity. Is that what all right, so basically that letter constituted no new information. And we already knew this. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Baker. I appreciate that. I do. We've heard from everybody. Before I go to the public, again, Mr. Nagel, Mr. Mirioni, Mr. Dimitrick, do you have anything else you want to talk about before we go to the public?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I think it's pretty evident that you requested some information and our goal is to bring that information back to you. And that the civil folks are working together to work through some of these issues. So obviously that requires a continuance to a meeting that I would think would be focused on at least those issues. Certainly any other issues you want to identify to be discussed as topics that night, I'd love for you to let us know now so we can obviously be prepared. I think that was great traction and a lot of good information from the board for us to, do what we need to do on certainly this particular Zone A issue.
Bringing up the point of other things to go through that you guys might want to have to work on. Again, I said this before. We have barely even touched upon the local conservation bylaw, the local wetlands bylaw. And again, myself, Mr. Tanzi, Pat Brennan, I think we all kind of agree that based on the definition, anything within 100 feet of the wetlands is considered resource area. That's basically what it sounds, that's the way that I read. Pat, Greg, do you disagree? Do you have a different interpretation?
Well, the 100-foot buffer to the resource area. The 100-foot is jurisdictional.
Mhm.
The wetland line is a resource area. I believe the zone A is a resource area. One thing that we haven't talked about is the zone 1 to the wells. I assume we're still looking to have groundwater wells as a drinking water supply for this project, which would generate a zone 1, which is that zone 1 is something that will have to be looked at, because that creates a more restrictive area than a zone A.
No, the zone A is more restrictive.
No,
Not there yet.
Zone 1 is more restrictive. Zone 1 is by far more restrictive. You have to have control over the zone 1, and it has to be basically kept pristine with the exception of an access road to maintain the well. So, and that zone 1 is either it's a minimum of 100-foot radius. Maximum it can be is 400. I don't think it'll be a 400. In fact, it won't be a 400-foot radius. You get 400-foot zone 1 radiuses where you have a yield of 100 GPD or more, and you won't get that from the site. But you might get a zone 1 radius that exceeds 100 foot. And that all depends upon a number of factors. The yield, there's a whole equation that goes into determining that zone 1. But that's something that the applicant should be looking into sooner than later, because it will come up. It is an issue.
Mr. Dimitrick, is that something that you could start to put on the plans? Because again, I don't even know where these wells that you put out there are.
Yeah, I believe from our well people that they're performing the test soon. I know that's been said for some time now. So I don't want to step out of line and say that when that's going to happen exactly. But they have been in communications with me regarding layout, locations of those things. So I think they're definitely getting closer to performing those tests. They are. I mean, just the location of them, I can generally pull up the general site plan and show you.
That I'm not worried about, sir. I want definitive location. At this point, we're getting to the point where we need definitive locations on everything. Generally, I know where they are. But
Okay.
Definitive.
No, understood.
Because they are drilled, correct? They are drilled. They are in the ground. Yes.
Believe so.
Okay. If they're drilled and in the ground, we'd like to know. And I'd like to see where they are, because in the grand scheme of things, once that's taken care of, you can do exactly what Greg is talking about, and you can show us 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet, 400 feet, whatever it is off of those. Because again, that all kind of goes over my head. Greg knows this very specifically. If there is a radial distance that we have to look at based on how much water these wells are gonna pump, then it would be nice to know that, and if it's going to impact your design at all. So that's something we need to see. Greg, again, I'm looking at the local wetlands bylaw, and in conversation with the Conservation Commission, most specifically the chair, in situations like this, they look at anything within 100 feet of a jurisdictional wetland to be the resource area. And I look at the wetlands bylaw and I'm trying to, again, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. But, Greg, between yourself, Pat Brennan, is there a different interpretation, that I'm looking at? Because if anything within 100 feet is considered the resource area, typically what the Conservation Commission has requested in the past is a remedial area. Is the words
Replication?
replication area. Yeah, they would require some sort of replication area. Now, I know in some towns, he couldn't, again, in talking to the chairman of the Conservation Commission, they didn't have like a formula that some municipalities have for replication area. Like Hingham has like a 2-to-1 in the 100 and like a 1-to-1 in the 50 to 100 and a 2-to-1 in the 25 to 50. Does that sound right?
I'm not familiar with that in the buffer zones.
Yeah, in the buffer zones, they require town of Hingham requires not necessarily replication area, but something. And I know that, again, I think what Hingham requires, it's not replication area, it's like tree plantings and stuff like that. But I don't know how to deal with this, because there is small portions of the resource area that they are disturbing, but not enough to really constitute anything where they need to replicate. But they are disturbing like 90% of the buffer. 90% of the buffer is looked at as strongly as the resource area according to the bylaw. I don't know how to deal with that.
Well, any loss of a wetland has to be replicated. It's typically replicated at 2-to-1.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only go up to 5,000 square feet unless your project qualifies for limited access. And limited access means you have to cross a wetland to get to your upland area. This project does not qualify as a limited access. On the causeway, I guess they might be able to
make a case for it.
Yeah, and also a if you have to bring in utilities, a utility corridor can also qualify as a limited access project. But anything for, incidental to grading, that will have to be replicated in an upland area, typically adjacent to the wetland and as close to the filling or disturbing area as is possible. There are other criteria. They like the expansion to, mimic the fill. I mean, if you filled a circular area, they would want a circular area replicated. If it's like an elongated area, they would like an elongated area replicated approximately the same length and width, that type of thing.
At this point, though, what I would ask of Mr. Dimitrick is, I know we've gone over this in the past, and you may be able to drag this up from previous plans and previous analysis. I'd like to see an analysis of how much of the actual resource area you are taking out, which I know it's not much. But I'd like to see. Right. I'd like to see a quantifying number on paper. So that's number one. Number two, how do we want to deal with the buffer itself? When it comes to the buffer areas. Pat, can you recommend anything at this point? Would you suggest anything at this point?
In terms of the disturbance within the buffer areas?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of disturbance within the 0 to 50, within the 0 to 100. And if the bylaw calls that, it treats that pretty much the same as the resource area.
Well, the bylaw has a 25-foot no disturb,
Okay.
which they will certainly be in for the work along the causeway coming in and some other places. You know, and I would also refer to the Conservation Commission peer review, who did bring up some of these points in his letter as well.
Okay.
You know, the construction of the retaining walls for the causeway will likely impact the actual wetlands, not just buffer zone.
Mhm.
And he's asked for them to quantify those impacts.
Okay, so we're asking.
So it is, yeah, it is being looked at, because as of right now, they're still reviewing it as if it's under their bylaw as well, I believe.
Okay.
Because the bylaw hasn't been waived by this board.
Well, we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Right.
So I'm saying that I don't think that we can. I mean, it's not a decision that's being made tonight, but in the grand scheme of things, if you're already quantifying to them, I'd like it for us too. So how much of the resource area is getting taken out? How much of the 25-foot buffer is getting 25-foot buffer off the resource area is getting taken out? From there, Pat, do we make them do the 25 to 50 and then the 50 to 100 as well?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful.
Mr. Dimitrick? Got it?
Understood. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can show those, or I'll work with our ecological group to quantify numbers according to your bylaws and so on and so forth.
Right, because the only other thing that I've had to deal with, I know Greg's had to deal with it, Pat's probably had to deal with it as well on both sides of the table, is dealing with volume of impervious surfaces within all the different buffers. Pat, should we make them go that far?
So again, I think it would be helpful if for each buffer, 0 to 25, we knew what the disturbance is, what the proposed impervious is. And then again, for the 25 to 50 and 50 to 100, I think that's reasonable. That's typical on a lot of projects.
Mr. Dimitrick, we're gonna go with what Mr. Brennan recommends.
To confirm, the numbers we're looking for are impacts associated with impervious versus non-impervious. Those numbers broken down from 0 to 25, 25 to 50, and 50 to 100.
And anything within the resource area itself.
Yes.
We all know that it's.
And I'll be working with the review engineers as with Concom, and I think Brad brought it up, the temporary impacts to those resource areas based on proposed designs of the retaining wall and the construction thereof.
Yeah, it's going to be basically it's going to be temporary and permanent. So temporary when you're doing the over excavation, and then permanent when it's actually installed. So.
Yeah, and I'll definitely qualify those numbers. You are correct. There's little permanent, if any.
Right. All right. So at least we're rolling on that. And once we get that, we can actually start to look at how we want to administer the local bylaw. So there's that. Other than that, does anybody on the board? Do we have anything else that we kind of need to look at? Obviously, there's drainage modifications that still need to be made. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be made at this point. And there's more information that we're requesting at this point. Board members, does anybody have anything else that they want to address with the applicant tonight? Applicant or their representatives?
Not from me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Baker Jr., thank you. Mr. Baker Sr., I saw you starting. Do you have anything that you want to add in here, sir?
No, I just, if they could touch bases with the highway, police, and the fire
Okay.
department on, they have some questions on the entrance out on Pond Street.
Okay. Mr. Haynes, do you have anything else? Are you good at this point, or?
I think I had a couple of concerns. There's so much stuff that we talked about with since this is one application, but we've gone through what I'm going to call them the previous applicant, even though it's the same application. But in the previous design, we talked a lot about parking, and we haven't talked about the parking on this particular plan and the amount of parking. And so I would say be prepared to discuss your parking strategies, because it has, it's a totally different mix. So I think
Drastic change. It's a drastic change from what they were preparing, what they were presenting.
Yeah, we've got fewer units, but we've got a lot less parking. So a lot of things have changed there. So I'd say parking. This came up already tonight, but I want to reiterate. So again, previous applicant, previous conversation, we talked a lot about the fill, having an LSP guide us on monitoring and examining and testing beyond, just, we're not really quite, the board hasn't been quite satisfied with, that meets the state standards. We're feeling a little bit, we're feeling a lot about this is like right on top of our drinking reservoir, and what additional controls, how do we all feel good about the fill and monitoring? So I think that we should be prepared to talk about that in greater detail. And I myself, I'm going to add one more thing that I personally am really concerned about that I keep bringing up, and it's never been adequately addressed, but it is building an 11-foot high wall between the neighborhoods close to Pond Street and this development. And there are 3 18-inch little pipes, and they're referred to in plans as check this out before you build anything. And I'm very concerned about the water running from those neighborhoods, especially in heavy storm situations, down through the wetlands and into the reservoir. We're building an 11-foot high wall, walling off that neighborhood and that drainage, and nowhere in here has anybody really studied whether that's adequate. And the overall concern is that we're building something that's going to flood, just cause flooding in the neighborhood, which is going to build a block. And no one has addressed, are those adequate? What are the conditions of those pipes? And at the moment, it just simply says, hey, before you build the causeway, figure this out. And I don't think that's good enough. So that is it for concerns, I would say, moving forward for me, in addition to all the other stuff we've talked about.
And thank you, Mr. Haynes, for bringing that all back up. I agree. We've talked about it a little bit in the past, but not in depth. Mr. Dimitrick. Oh, sorry, Tim. I didn't mean to butt in.
Yeah, and we just haven't talked about it with this applicant.
Yeah, with Mr. Dimitrick, we haven't really talked about it with you. That's the big thing. So just know that that's going to be coming up. Mr. Tanzi, anything else that you want to put in the hands of the applicant to talk about?
None that I can think of.
All right. At this point, because we haven't had a chance to, we haven't done so. We're going to open up. I do want to open it up to the public. Let's keep this brief. Let's not beat a dead horse. We all know the issues. If you've got something new to talk about, I'd love to hear it. But I just don't want to rehash things that we've already talked about. So does anybody want to say anything in favor or against this application?
Can I speak?
Absolutely.
Mary Parsons, Union Street, Rockland. We didn't discuss the email that I got from Richard Friend that stated October 11th, 2022. And he is very specific. This is a Conoco map. It's not the DEP map. It's Conoco's map.
Right.
And he was very clear that you cannot, put things underground in a Zone A. And he says that it was such a minor change that the Zone A map, the DEP Zone A map has not changed. This will not change that. The red striped lines you see, that is the DEP map. The blue striped lines you see that's what Conoco wants to change it to. They can't pipe water pipes, sewer pipes, tanks, anything like that to get to their buildings through Zone A. The other issue is those vernal pools, you have to be 100 feet away. And if I remember correctly, because it's been a couple of years since those maps were shown, this applicant wants to come within 25 feet of one of the certified vernal pools.
Okay.
Then there's the wells, okay? The wells, they may at some point draw in contamination, and there is a contaminated site that hasn't been checked by road. And it's the Boston Whaler, and it is actually maybe in a bog, and they don't want anyone touching that. But at some point, when you drill wells in an area that's approximate to contamination, at some point DEP worries about drawing that contamination into the wells, and that can draw it into our reservoir. So those are issues that have to be addressed. And DEP is very specific. This idea that defining discharge, I'm sorry, you can't discharge stormwater into a Zone A. That is the consultant from the Concom, and he's an expert. He was the state's expert. He's a civil engineer, and he's very good at what he does. I could go on and on, but I'm not going to go on and on.
I appreciate that, Mary. I absolutely do. Thank you very much.
And you email, I gave it to Deb.
Yep, no,
along
I
with-
think Deb posted it on the website too, right?
Yes, she did.
Mr. Dimitrick, did you get a copy of that?
Yes.
Okay, as long as you got a copy of it, that's fine. So
I don't know if it was formally submitted to us, but I found it on the website. So.
all right. So Mary, you know that the applicant got a copy of it. I want you to make sure. I
Right.
just want-
Yep, I know. Everyone can see it. My information is everyone's information.
Perfect. Anybody else want to speak? Oh,
Make
sorry.
3 site visits. They did make 3 site visits to this in a drought,
You know,
and
nice.
that's very important.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Thank you for that information. That helps a little, helps out a lot. Anybody else? Does anybody else want to speak about the proposed application at this point?
I have one question.
One question.
Okay, people have noticed that they have been doing some work and with gravel, and it looks like, I don't want to say test pitting, it looks like they're using a pit to pour water into. That's what I've seen that this thing looks like. What are they doing out there? I don't see a DEP number either.
How are they accessing the site, man?
That's the question.
Well,
They are doing some kind of gravel thing and building this rectangular object.
wait a second. Are they going to, the only way to get down there is to go through Wilson Street?
Well, they're building something.
Uh,
Not in wood. There is something like it. It may be test pitting, but I don't think so. What I've seen that this structure looks like is something that you contain water in and let it.
guys, can anybody speak to this? And the whole point is that Wilson Street, we're not supposed to be using Wilson Street for anything.
They're not using Wilson Street that I know of. I think they're coming off of Colby somehow. Well, no, they can't come off of Colby, but there
No.
is this structure.
Guys, Mr. Dimitrick, Mr. Attorney Nagel, Attorney Marioni, can we speak to this? Anybody?
I have no idea. I mean, I'd be happy to inquire with Mr. Lincoln in the morning unless Damien knows.
Yeah, I need to.
I have no idea, honestly. If I did, I'd tell you. I don't know.
No,
Yeah,
I
let me
believe-
let me get you an answer, unless Damien knows.
Yeah, the neighbors are seeing this.
Okay,
Well,
well,
let me chase Mr. Lincoln down. He's out of town. And I'll get you an answer.
yeah, I think we need an absolute answer to what's going on here, because the whole point is that, again, Wilson Street cannot handle construction traffic. They can barely handle the UPS trucks that
They
go down.
accessed it on November 8th.
Hi, Rob Rose, it's Joe Jackson from 19 Wilson Street.
Yep.
Yeah, the trucks have been accessing Wilson Street. They've been going up and down and They're building some type of, like someone was alluding to, they're building some type of a pond that's like rubber lined with hay bales or whatever. I'm not sure what it is, but I was wondering myself what this is. And this occurred on 11/8.
Yeah.
Could be associated with the testing for the wells. I'm not 100%.
No.
But
Yeah, but whatever it is, you should be stating something that's going on. You know that, and I'm not getting mad at you. Yeah, it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with either of the attorneys on your team. It has everything to do with the fact that everybody on your team knows that this is the most contentious project in town right now. And to do anything below board is not good. You know, you guys at this point should be above board on everything that you're doing because of what's going on now. All of a sudden, we're hearing from your neighbors that construction traffic is going up and down Wilson Street. You're building something, you know, and regardless of what's going on in there, and if it wasn't a 40B project, you know, is what you're doing in there, does that constitute the necessity of a permit through the planning board? You know what I mean? This is now I'm nervous. So yeah, I think you guys need to get us some answers and get it quick because this does not bode well for you guys at all.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Can I recommend that the board take a site visit and see the structure? And also, if there are any abutters who have photographs of truck traffic, if you could submit them to the board, that would probably be helpful to us.
Taking
If they have photographs of the structure too.
you really can't go on the applicant's property.
No, but you can do zoom lens.
Say again?
If you want to visit the property, we'd be happy to make it available and even go out there with you, no problem.
That's
Not an issue.
I don't know where we were going. That's fine.
Yeah, no issue. Yep.
All right, this weekend, again, if we want to talk about scheduling a site visit, we can do that now. This weekend is out for me. We can do it next weekend. If people had time off during the week, we could do it during the week, but I know this weekend I can't do it. So if we wanted to talk about doing a site visit to see what the heck's going on out there, I'm all in favor of it. But like I said, just this weekend, I'm booked.
You're getting into Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem. Problem. But I guarantee that anything that they're doing is still going to be in place even after Thanksgiving. Because if it's not, then they really got something to discuss. Because they went in there, built a whole bunch of stuff, and then hit it, then tore it apart.
Where is the DEP number for it? With their wells, there should be a DEP number.
And this is what the applicant has to provide to us. So because now it's an issue because if they're doing a whole bunch of stuff in there, and did conservation approve this? Did they need to approve it? What's the location of this stuff that you're doing? Is it in relation to the wetlands, the current wetlands line or within 100 feet? Is it in the zone A? I mean, this is big time. This is big time. So,
Rob, you think we should drop a dime to the conservation commissioners?
I'll be honest with you. If
they could go up and look at it and put a cease and desist.
I'm thinking that a certain person with an iPad already did. Looking at you, Mary Parsons, I'm thinking you've already talked to them. So if they already know, they should already be on this.
They haven't had a meeting about Shingle Mill yet.
Okay, when's their meeting?
That meeting that they were supposed to have that continued.
All right. What about when's their next meeting? Is it next week?
I think it's next week, yeah.
All right. Well, again, we're not tattletales. This board is not tattletales, but it's going in the minutes that we were talking about it. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a question on the information that we've asked the applicant to provide regarding whatever is going on site and on Wilson Street. Can we require them to submit that information to us by a date certain, or do we have to just say, do it quickly?
Attorney Goggin, you hearing this?
Oh, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
gotcha.
So I'm not sure if I was trying to open my microphone here to get on here, but what is the exact question again?
Yeah, Bob.
Apparently they're doing a lot of work out on site. All right, they're traveling up and down Wilson Street, constructing a something. It sounds like there's heavy equipment out there, moving stuff around, building some sort of a rubber-lined pond or something that potentially has something to do with the wells that they're drilling. But everything that they're doing kind of constitutes potential potential conflicts with planning board applications. They would need planning board approval to do this.
Why would they need planning board approval to do that?
What are they building?
I don't know if I have no idea what they're even doing now.
That's my point. It sounds like they're building something. So
it does sound like they're constructing a dewatering basin. I don't think it's rubber lined. And so it's a temporary structure for the wells. Again, this is based on assumption that that's what's going on out there. So it would be, hay bales with a filter fabric pushed around it. I believe all of that has been done with DEP. I mean, again, I'm not in charge of that. That is being handled.
Is it in a resource area? Is the work in a resource?
It would be in the buffers, and that would have, I believe those NOIs and that information, not handled by me specifically, has been above board and done so properly.
And that very well may be the case. It very well may be the case, but the sheer fact is that we want to know about it, and we want to know about it quick. Because
Rob, I think it's suggested, why don't we just ask the Conservation Commission if they would look into this? Okay.
Deb, can you do us a favor and just reach out to the Conservation Commission and ask them if they know what's going on? Thank you. All right, Mr. Baker, does that work for you?
Let me just ask Attorney Galvin a question. In directing it to the Conservation Commission, Bob, does that mean that the request that we thought we were making is not something that's within our purview?
Well, if they've got an order of conditions to do this work, you probably don't. I don't know what they have. Okay, but they would know better if they're testing something that's associated with something that they're responsible for.
You don't have to withdraw the request. We'll get you the information. No problem.
I just did. The only
Fair
reason why I'm getting kind of heated about this is the sheer fact that you guys are doing stuff with the Conservation Commission, most specifically for this project. We know that, but there are other things. Again, these wells that we knew nothing about. We knew absolutely nothing about. We ended up hearing it through the grapevine, when in reality, it's a part of this project. Even though it came up later on after the project was submitted, and we already had a couple meetings, and then there was an issue with water. That's why you guys are drilling the wells. You should have told us about all this stuff. This is what I'm talking about, being above board. It's unfortunate, but you can't assume that every board in this town talks to each other, because they don't. So
it's not a problem. Honestly, I get it.
And Walter, again, please do not take my heatedness.
No, you're fine.
All right.
I've sat in your seat for 20 years. I get it. You ask a question, we'll get you an answer. I get it.
Yeah, but you didn't sit in an awesome office.
I did not have the guitars. I did not.
No, but it still comes down to, any and all things that are going on, they need to be talked about.
Fair, very fair.
If everybody's playing fair, then everybody's doing what they're supposed to do.
Yep.
And
All right.
Mr. Chairman, just so we're certain where this is going, Mr. Marion, when can you get that information to us?
Well, I can't answer that definitively. I told you that I will reach out to Mr. Lincoln tomorrow. He's out of town.
Yeah,
And when he
Rick's
gets
on
back to me,
vacation.
I'll report it back to you. I'm not being evasive. I just don't know his schedule. He's out of town. He's pretty responsive. I don't generally have a problem communicating with him. He usually gets back to me within a day. And when I get the answer, I'll share it with you. It'll be quick.
I've reached out to him before, and even though he was either going on vacation or on vacation at the time, he got back to me within 24
I agree. He's pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know that.
Mr. Roser, I have a quick question.
Yep.
right.
An address.
Yep, appreciate your time tonight, by the way.
Mr. Ronan.
Patrick Ronan, 280 Turner Road.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to address the board. I appreciate all your time, gentlemen. I have a quick question about the DEP that was mentioned earlier. If they don't cooperate, and this is probably directed to Attorney Nagel as well, you said they may or may not cooperate. So if they do not cooperate and do not send that correspondence that was requested, where does it leave the board?
Where does that leave the board? That's something that we're gonna have, that's a bridge we're gonna have to cross. I can't say that, we can't say that right now because we don't know where we are. So once we get any kind of a definitive answer as to whether the DEP is gonna give us something or not, then we can figure it out from there.
Do they matter though? In my opinion, he said they mean nothing, which I found interesting.
What do you mean, do they matter?
He said they meant nothing. I thought he said they meant nothing. Or did he I misunderstand him?
I think he misinterpreted what he said.
Okay. I don't understand that then. I thought they meant everything, because if they don't approve this, or they don't approve or disapprove, they just give us their report or their recommendations. Am I correct?
Attorney Nagel, did you want to?
Yeah, the DEP is going to agree or disagree with our proposed changes to the Zone A. They're not going to approve this project. That's in the board's court. So if they're not legally required to issue a letter, we can't force them to do it. I hope they do. I think that would help a lot. I think that'll help everybody here. But if they don't, respond to your question, if they don't do anything beyond what they've already done and send an email saying that they agree with our changes to the Zone A, then, we're going to do what this board has asked us to do and provide background information as to how we came up with what we did. There was a lot of good questions about that, and I think you guys deserve an answer. So if we can't get anything more formal than an email out of DEP, we'll certainly provide all the information you're asking for about, how and why we came to the conclusions that we did.
So that would be up to our board to decide whether what you folks are propose to, if they don't agree with you, that would rest with the board.
Well, I mean, obviously the board is relying on their own peer review.
There's a question to Mr. Rosa. Is that what I understand?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's up to us basically, if they don't give us something in writing on DEP letterhead, it's up to us to determine if they're lying or not.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Not a problem, sir. And I just to go back at this, and I don't want to keep hammering this. If there's a flood zone and you don't believe that you're in a flood zone, this has nothing to do with the project. This is just generalities. If FEMA says you're in a flood zone and you don't believe that you're in a flood zone, and you fill out the LOMA application and prove to FEMA that you're not in a flood zone, you get a letter of map amendment. So there's a piece of paper that then says that your property is no longer in the flood zone. The federal government doesn't necessarily modify the map immediately. But at least you have a piece of paper that says that you're out of the flood zone. And then years later, sometimes after 10 years later, when they decide to redo the maps again, then that Loma and every other Loma in the area has the potential to get taken into consideration and change that line. But it's along the same line. I feel like it's along the same lines with the DEP. Although with the DEP, it doesn't sound like they give you this letter of map amendment. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like they give you a piece of paper that you can stand on and say, "Yep, federal government said I'm out of the flood zone." So I'm kind of using that as an example. But in the grand scheme of things, it's still going to come down to the applicant to ask, and it's still going to come down to the DEP to fulfill the request if they so desire. And again, that's why we asked for all the backup information so we can kind of go over this and just examine. That help, Mr. Ronan? Yes?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Not a problem. Anybody else? Anybody else want to discuss anything? Because again, we still have a lot that we got to deal with at the next meeting. I just want to make sure everybody's okay at this point. And hearing none, I'm going to leave it at that. Let's talk about continuance. Let's talk about date certain, date and time certain. Let's also talk about extending the time period to make any kind of decisions. So I go to my number one, Deb Shuttlesworth. What do you got, lady? What do we got for potential dates we can work with?
Like February 7th, 21st.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. All right, so I'm looking at February. We're that far out. Gentlemen on the board, if we're looking at February, does the 21st work for everybody?
Yes.
Hearing everybody arguing. Attorney Nagel, Marioni, Mr. Dimitrick, yes, no?
Tell me and we'll be available.
I'm looking at, again, we're looking at the 21st, 6:30. Does that work for everybody?
21st of February, right?
21st of February.
Yeah, it'll work for me.
It'll fly. Mr. Galley, yes. That works. Nicole, you turn your camera off. Thumbs up will work.
Yeah, no, I'm available.
That works. All right. So it sounds like everybody. Again, Pat Brennan, Attorney Galvin, we're going to want you there. So hopefully we can plan on that. With all that said, I'd entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion
Nice. What motion would that be, sir?
to continue to February 21,
At
6:30
PM?
PM.
Rock and roll. I got a
I'll
motion.
second that.
Got a second. Roll call. Deb, can you do me a favor and remind me who's voting on this? Do you remember who's voting on this?
I don't know who's voting.
Let's go back. Let's go back.
Just the four of
I believe it's just the four of us because again, Chuck recused and then he left the board. So, and that's all we had at the time. Correct?
right.
Okay. So I have a motion. I have a second. Roll call is required. Mr. Tanzi,
Yes.
myself is a yes. Mr. Haynes,
Yeah.
Mr. Baker Senior,
Yes.
rock and roll. All right.
One more
Guys,
thing,
oh, one more thing.
you have to extend the close of the hearing.
Attorney Marioni.
Yeah, we'll get you a letter in the morning. We agreed to extend to a meeting on that night as well as time to close the hearing and render a decision. And I'll get you, like I always do, a letter over in the morning.
Thank you.
And Deb, you're gonna put together just a letter to him or an email to him saying that we continue. Perfect. All right, so communication is 100%.
We'll
All
take care of it. Thank you.
right, thank you. I appreciate that. So now let's go back to,
Rob, do we need to make a motion to accept his continuation?
no, I
Timeframe?
don't think we have to accept that. He just has to approve it. Last thing that I wanted to do was just look at the agenda real quick to see if there's anything else we had to deal with. La, 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 la. Is there anything else non-deliberative? Deb, got anything to talk about?
Nothing,
Nothing. We got any minutes to talk about?
none.
I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Need a second?
I'll second it.
I got a second. Roll call. Mr. Tanzi?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Mr. Haynes?
Yes.
Mr. Baker Senior?
Yes.
Go home, everyone. Thank you for attending. I appreciate it. It was a good meeting tonight.
Good
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Bye now.
you.